All right, so we are back again this week. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be doing Undone this week. It was one that I've been really excited to watch. It takes place in my hometown of San Antonio, Texas. It's got Bob Odenkirk in it. And I really like the rotoscoping animation. I think it's really cool. So I went into this show with high expectations. And let's see if Undone met those expectations or not. And as usual, I will be spoiling the first episode of Undone. So if you are worried about that sort of thing, now's your time to leave. Before I get into the spoilers. Okay, so when I was talking to my girlfriend earlier while I was watching Undone. I finished watching it about 3 or 4 hours ago, and I just got into the studio that I used to record. So I've had some time to think about it, and I was talking to her about it, and the thing that I said to her was that I'm glad that you guys are going to get to see both sides of my critiquing personality early on, because last week with The Boys, I loved the pilot for The Boys. I actually went through and watched the whole show. I thought it was a great show, a flawed show, but I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. And now you're going to get to see the part of me that comes out when I don't like a show. We'll put it like that. That sentiment will probably crystallize a little bit more as you listen to the rest of the review. But needless to say, I came into Undone with very high expectations. It's got high ratings on every journalism site, Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb. It looked like all the critics were giving it praise for, I don't know, something or other. It's by the creator of BoJack Horseman, which me and BoJack have a complicated history. It's one of those shows that I've never really liked, but like at the same time, for some reason I got sucked into it enough to watch the first 4 seasons when it was only 4 seasons. I think now they're up to 5 and the 6th one's on the horizon or something. But maybe it'll be out by the time this airs. I have no idea when it's coming out. But BoJack was a show that I could never get into because BoJack Horseman was just a despicable protagonist, and it never felt like he ever did anything to really improve his situation. It just felt like he was sad all the time, and I mean, that's sad to watch, but I wouldn't call it entertaining. And the first 22-minute episode of Undone has given me very similar vibes to all the things that I did not like about BoJack Horseman. For anyone who doesn't know, this is by, I don't know if it's the whole same creative team, but Raphael Bob Waksberg created BoJack Horseman. He's also a co-creator on this show, and then I can't remember the other co-creator, but it was someone else who worked on BoJack. Kathy something? Purdy? I could be wrong. I think that's the last name. I don't remember. I just remember Raphael Bob Waksberg's name because it's such an all-over-the-place name. Like, you got the first name Raphael, and that's a curveball in and of itself. And then you go to Bob, very mundane, and then you go to Waksberg. It's all over the place as far as names go. It's very easy to remember. So I'll give Undone points for that, having a memorable name for one of its creators. But this show really tested my patience, and it was only 22 minutes long. I only watched the pilot again, try not to watch the rest of the episodes before I do the recording, because I want my opinion to be as distilled and focused on the pilot as possible. But the first thing that really intrigued me about this show was the use of the rotoscoping animation. And for what it's worth, it's really cool. It's really different. It's not like anything else you'll really see on TV. I think I believe there was a movie based on a Philip K. Dick novel that used the same. I mean, I'm sure the technique's been used a lot of different places, but as far as like a standalone technique to use the entire run through of a movie or TV show, I believe that A Scanner Darkly, which I have not watched or read, used the same technique. And so a lot of people were comparing it to that. And so the rotoscoping part was what really drew me in, because I really like animation. I really think animation is an underutilized medium, especially for adults. It doesn't really get used for anything besides raunchy comedies. I mean, that's now starting to change, but to me, it's always been super underutilized. And so I was really excited about this show coming out, And then I found out that it takes place in San Antonio, where I've lived for the past 18 years. And I was like, wow, okay, I really have to give this show a shot at some point. I'm really, critics are saying good things about it. I got to give it a shot. And then earlier today, I watched it. And God, I did not enjoy this show at all. I'm sorry. That's the best way that I can put it. Let me be a little bit more specific. So the first thing that, like I said, drew me in was the setting, because it's where I'm from, San Antonio. It doesn't get a lot of representation, even though it's a kind of unique place. And so that was the first thing that I was really holding my I was sort of holding my breath on was, okay, are they going to get San Antonio right? Or are they going to show 18 shots of the Alamo in the first episode? Let's find out. And the answer is neither, because the city of San Antonio plays almost no part in this first episode that I watched at all. One thing that I talked about with the boys was how good it was at giving us a true sense of place. Of like, yeah, it's New York City, but it's New York City infested with superheroes at every turn. Everywhere you look, there's a new superhero poster or a movie coming out or something relating to superheroes, you know? It really got that sense of place right and showed Huey's little hole that he had carved out in New York City. And it's super important to get that right in your first episode and to have that be prominently displayed, because, you know, ultimately caring about the characters, we're going to care about them more the more we watch, but really what's going to draw us in a lot of the time is the setting, because the setting is something that you can immediately show as being compelling and interesting without really needing a lot of setup. You know, I can show you a painting of something and you might be immediately entranced by it in the way that, like, I could show you a portrait of a person and you might be intrigued by it, you might think it's interesting, but to be completely honest, it's not going to have the same effect on you as looking at like a painting of a location is going to have in terms of immediacy and drawing you in. And I think that TV shows work a very similar way to that. You can try to get me interested in your character, and a good pilot will get me interested in the protagonist, or get rather anyone interested in the protagonist. But the setting is something that I think is just absolutely paramount to convey. And San Antonio is barely in this goddamn pilot. It doesn't do anything. There's one shot of the overpasses at the very beginning when she's driving down the street, and I'm like, that looks like San Antonio. And then the next time that we get any sense of location is when they're on the goddamn Riverwalk, which, I mean, for anyone who's not from San Antonio, no locals ever go to the Riverwalk. It turns out that the main character's boyfriend works there, which is like, if they had just been at the Riverwalk, I would have been like, ooh, you are testing me right now, show. There's nothing wrong with the Riverwalk. It's just that no local spends their weekends there, really, at all. Of course, I'm going to get an email from the one San Antonio locals like, I spend every weekend at the Riverwalk. Great for you. That's fantastic. Most people do not spend any time at the Riverwalk if they live here. And then later they're in a church, and then that's it. Like, there's no San Antonio. There was no reason why this show really had to be set in San Antonio from the first episode. Almost all of it takes place indoors, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing specifically San Antonio about it. And I am in a unique position, being from San Antonio, to actually critique whether or not that's the case. And trust me, this could have taken place anywhere. The only really San Antonio-y thing was that the main character's family, her mom is Hispanic and her dad is white. And again, that can happen anywhere. San Antonio is not the only place where that is an occurrence. And that was like, to me, that was, of course, it was over the whole course of the episode that I was looking and waiting and watching, where's San Antonio going to matter? When is San Antonio going to play into effect? Like, even in like a show, like one thing that, like a show like Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was originally set, because I've read the pilot script that Vince Gilligan wrote, which we'll go over that at some point. But the original pilot script took place in, I think, Northern California. Definitely California. I think it was Northern California. And then they had to sort of retrofit it to take place in Albuquerque, because Albuquerque was giving them a lot of, the state of New Mexico was giving them a lot of, oh Christ, what's the word? I'm losing my mind. I did this last week. reasons to film there. What are those called? Incentives. Jesus. They gave them a lot of incentives to film in New Mexico, and so they were like, okay, well, I guess now it's Albuquerque. But the sense of place with Albuquerque and like being out on the Native American reservation in the first episode, cooking meth. Spoiler alert: if you haven't watched the show, they cook meth in it. Like, even though that was a show that originally took place in a completely different state, but they still did a fantastic job of giving it that sense of setting. Now, of course, it's unfair to compare Undone to what may be one of the greatest, or rather is one of the greatest TV dramas of all time, but I was really looking for San Antonio to play a part, and what did we get? We really only got one shot of the Riverwalk, and it was essentially just location porn, so they could be like, San Antonio? Because they didn't want to show the Alamo, because that would have been too cheesy, but then they show the Riverwalk, which if you live in San Antonio, you're just like, oh god, that's just as bad. Like, I mean, thanks for not showing a close-up shot of the Alamo. I mean, I guess I'll give you points for holding off on that for at least the first episode, but it was just, I was not a fan of the use, or rather the lack of use of the setting. And of course, I was probably more personally offended than most people watching would be, but the show just doesn't have a good sense of place to me. Like, it could really be anywhere. Anyways, that's my opinions on the setting. There's just really not a ton to talk about there. So let's move on from that. So like I said, the show is 22-minute episodes. I will admit that it's hard to fit everything that you need to fit into a 22-minute episode, especially if you're trying to tell a serious story, and because the show wasn't really, it's not a comedy. Like, it had one or two funny parts, but it's not, like, it's clearly not geared towards being a comedy, even though it has the 22-minute episodes. But when you look at a show that uses the half hour effectively, like a show like Atlanta, and then you look at the first episode of Undone, the sheer difference in the number of things that happens in a good use of the 22 minutes is just staggering. Like, when we open on Undone, the first scene is a car crash, and our protagonist, Alma, she's crying, she's driving her car, she's running stoplights because, you know, I guess when you're upset, you don't look at the road when you're driving. Like, you just forget that traffic signs apply. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter. We open on her. She's crying. She's driving her car. And then she runs a red light. And, she gets hit by another car. I guess I forgot to mention, like, so that I don't have people on my social medias, Bob Odenkirk's character, her dad, materialized on the side of the road right before she crashed her car. I guess that was why she crashed her car. I mean, they did show her running a bunch of different lights, but she sees her dad materialize on the side of the road, and then she gets distracted for a second, and then she crashes her car. So I guess I'll be fair. I got off on a little bit of a tangent, and also it just, like, didn't do anything for me when he showed up. It's like, oh my god, it's Alma's dad, who I don't know anything about, but is apparently dead, and he's on the side of the road. And that's great. The use of the, what do they call it? In media res, I think that's the technical name for it. The use of the flashback to open, or the flash forward rather, to open the show. It is, I don't see it as being a defensible option here. Like, because it's just a car crash. It's not anything super interesting. Like, if you're gonna do that, because it's become so sort of hokey and overused to start your story at the interesting part and then build up to it later, you know, it's not a technique that I'm a fan of unless it's employed with just absolute perfection, and which it is not here. Like, why do I care that she's crying? Why do I care that she's in a car crash? I don't know anything about this person. I've just met her. She hasn't spoken a word. She's just driving her car and crying, and then she gets hit by another car, and then her car spins out, and then she gets a pull. Like, that does nothing for me. It's not, there's no flavor to it. There's no texture to it. There's nothing special about it. Like, again, to compare to Breaking Bad, which is, again, an unfair comparison, but, like, that's a show that I believe in every episode uses the flash forwards. But you think of the first episode of Breaking Bad, and it's a guy driving an RV with 2 dead bodies in the back seat while wearing a gas mask. He jumps out of the car with just his underpants on and a gun in his waistband, and then hears the cops coming, or what he thinks at the time are the cops, and points the gun at them. That's how you do that technique effectively. It's like I'm in the story. I'm like, how does this? What happened? But a car crash is something that could occur to, and crying. A car crash and crying are things that could happen to anyone at any time. Like, somebody could say something mean to me on the tail end of me recording this podcast, and I could get in I mean, shit, I got into a car crash like a month ago. And that's just something that happens. Like, it's not interesting. It's not compelling. It's not gripping. It's just, yeah, sometimes cars hit each other, especially in San Antonio where all the drivers are fucking stupid, especially Alma, not smart to run through every single stoplight, but whatever. That doesn't matter. But bad opening, and then we were treated to the flashback to now or whatever, and she's like talking to her sister, and she's complaining about like, every day I eat the same food, every day I do the same thing, routine is the devil, I need more stimulation, picking between different kinds of beans, have the margins of my life become so narrow. Basically is the gist of it. And her sister's like, I don't care, I'm getting married. And then the sister is getting married. And then you find out through some really clunky exposition that their dad is dead. I know it sounds like I'm just being like a sarcastic tool right now, but like, it's genuinely difficult to provide a synopsize. Is that a word? I'm having so much deja vu to last week. It's hard to provide a synopsis. It's hard to provide a synopsis of the plot because it just feels like a lot of characters talking and a lot of disjointed events happening. None of it which is very compelling, and none of it which, like the thing that I'm most reminded of is there's a famous clip on YouTube of the South Park creators, Matt Parker and Trey Stone. Or is it Trey Stone and Matt Parker? I think it's the first one. I literally always confuse their first and last names because they're so... It's like you're fitting a fucking jigsaw of like white people names. Like Matt, Trey, Stone, Parker. They could fit in any fucking order you want them. It could be Stone Parker, Parker Stone, Matt Trey, Trey Matt. I don't know. But it's those guys talking about like their storytelling methods and how they use the but and what they call the but and therefore method. So like if they're telling a story, to make sure that all of the events of the story actually build upon one another, they find it important to link each of the events with either the word but or the word therefore. So like, I was going to the store, but my car ran out of gas. Therefore, I had to call for help on the side of the road. But then my cell phone was... I'm just making shit up as I go along. Like each of them flows into the other, and each event builds on the previous event. Rather than if you just use and then, like, I went to the store, and then I bought some bananas, and then I went back to my car, and then I drove home, and then, it's just a bunch of events happening in no particular order and with nothing really linking them. Whereas, like, I can't run out of gas and then try to go to the store. Like, I ran out of gas, therefore I went to the store. That doesn't make any sense. I ran out of gas, or I went to the store, or I wanted to go to the store rather, but I ran out of gas. That's a linear progression of events that makes sense and that drives conflict and therefore drives the story forward. But this show is... Undone's first episode is the ultimate museum exhibit of and then storytelling. It's just a bunch of shit that happens in no particular order. Like, you find out that her dad is dead, and then you find out that her sister's getting married, and then she acts immaturely at a party, and then they get drunk, and then she breaks up with her boyfriend, and then this it's just a drag to watch, like, the entire time. I can't synopsize the plot, but because I can't remember like what order things happened in. When I did a synopsis of the plot of The Boys, there was a bigger gap of time in between me watching it and me doing the plot synopsis than there has been between me watching Undone and doing attempting this plot synopsis. And The Boys was 3 times longer. That was an hour-long TV show. This is a 22-minute episode. I can't remember anything. Like, I can't remember the sequence of the events at all because they didn't matter. When you're telling a linear story, like, just as an example of The Boys, because that's the last one that I watched before this, all the events had to happen in the order that they happened in. Because how could they happen in any other order? Starlight can't become a member of the Seven and then later on send in her audition tape to become a member of the Seven. That's not how it works. Those events have to happen in a specific sequence, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's good storytelling. You want the events to build on each other. With this fucking show, things just happen at random, and it doesn't, like, the sequencing doesn't matter. I could rewrite the entire first script and reorder every event that happened, and it would tell essentially the same story, which is no story, because none of the events matter. Oh, and by the way, the last thing that happens in the episode is, which is the only thing that I could even remotely ascribe as being the inciting incident, is the car crash. So it's the first thing that we see, and then it's the last thing that we see. Because, like circles, man, circles are so deep. There's so much deep hidden symbolism in us seeing it at the beginning and at the end, because the show's about time. Whoa. I'm not a fan of that explanation, if you couldn't tell. But let me read you the Google plot thingy. I don't know what they're called when it's only like a sentence. I guess that's the synopsis, but whatever. Quote, after 28-year-old Alma nearly dies in a car accident, she finds out that she has a new relationship with time. She develops this newfound relationship to find out the truth about her father's death. So, that's an interesting premise. I'm into it. I would love to watch a show about that. But the thing that these streaming service shows, and I think it is a specific illness of the streaming service TV shows, is that there's no sense of urgency for them in their minds to establish the story thread, or to establish an interesting story from the get-go. They feel like they can be as meticulous as they want setting up the dominoes. Like, we're not just going to get bored of watching people set up dominoes for 22 minutes. Like, I don't want to watch people set up dominoes for 22 minutes. I want to watch the end where the dominoes get knocked down. Like, that's the part that I want to see, where things start to happen. You don't get a free first episode to throw all your exposition at us. Like, literally, the exposition just gets barfed onto us. Like, oh, my dad's dead. I like indigenous peoples, like, as her, like, I don't know, she likes to study them as her hobby or something. I don't want to make it sound like I'm just like, who cares about indigenous peoples? Like, yeah, they're important, but, like, that's not an interesting personality trait on its own. It's like people that try to turn liking things into, like, a personality. That's not how it works. You got to be interesting on your own. You can't like things as a personality trait. That's the point I'm trying to make. And that's what it feels like they tried to do with her. And all of it's, like, shoehorned in, just exposition. My sister's getting married. Oh no, she's cheating on her husband, or her husband-to-be, with this guy that we met at a bar for some reason. And then, like, probably the most egregious part of the episode was at the end, when the fight that that leads Alma to go away crying is Alma shouts at her sister, Becca, I think is her name. She shouts at Becca while Becca's in her car, in Becca's own car. She's like, "We're broken people," and then she, like, they say some more stuff, and then Alma storms away. Like, who the fuck taught you how to write dialogue? Nobody just shouts "we're broken people" at their sister and then runs away in a huff and then starts crying and then ignoring traffic signals. That's so dumb. Like, that's just terrible dialogue writing. Who wrote that? I mean, like, Jesus, being sad is not a personality trait. that you get to just co-opt and then expect people to want to watch. That was always my biggest problem with BoJack. Like, I actually much preferred BoJack to this show, which, I mean, again, I didn't hate BoJack. I felt like it had a lot of interesting ideas, but like the main character's defining characteristic being depression, to me, it just doesn't work. It doesn't make for a narratively compelling character, in my personal opinion, and from what I've seen here, it still doesn't. Alma, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but Alma is not a compelling protagonist. And the reason for that is I don't hate her. When I was done watching the show and I was like texting my girlfriend about it, I was like, I fucking hate this protagonist. She's so whiny. She's blah, blah, blah. But the more I thought about it, I was like, no, I don't hate her. That's the wrong word. I have contempt for her as a character. And to me, that's so much worse. A contempt is, you can't come back from that. You can hate a character and still be on the edge of your seat wondering what happens to them, even if you're rooting against them. But I'm not rooting for or against Alma. I'm just rooting for her to not be on my screen anymore. She's awful to watch. And the reason is because she's just, it's not clear to me that she really wants anything or is trying to accomplish anything or is doing anything interesting. She complains about her life, just staying the same, and complains about things never changing and how she's tired of the routine and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, that's great. What are you going to do about it? Like, you don't get to say, I'm bored with how things are, and then not do anything to change it, and then expect me to care about you. Because everyone knows those people that are like, oh, this month I'm going to start working out. New Year's Eve is rolling around. They're gonna start eating healthy. They're gonna start working out. They're gonna get their life together. They're gonna finish writing their screenplay. Oh no, that's me. Whoops. Everyone's met those people that are like, keep talking about how they're gonna change and keep talking about how different things are gonna be. And there's a reason why people don't write screenplays about those fucking people, because they're not fun to listen to. Anytime those people start going in real life, you're just like, looking for the exit. Like, how do I get away from this fucking guy? It's just more of the same stuff, more of the same. And you don't necessarily hate those people. You have contempt for them. You don't respect them. You're not interested in them. You're bored by them. It's the worst. I can't think of a worse adjective to ascribe to a protagonist than contempt. Or I guess it's not an adjective that you would ascribe to them. That would be, you know what I mean? A feeling that you could have towards a protagonist. I can't think of one worse than contempt. That's awful. That's just show killing, in my opinion. I don't know how this show has such high ratings on every rating service. Granted, I've only watched the first episode, but I'm tired of giving shows the pass because, oh, it really picks up after the first episode. Like, that's not how it worked when you were on network television. It's like, if somebody isn't engaged by the first 5 minutes of your pilot episode, they're gone forever. Imagine that. Like, you're trying to get somebody's attention in 5 minutes, and if you don't get it, then they're gone forever. That is tough. And it feels like the swing towards wasted first episodes is almost in reaction to that, like trying to prove that the audience is like willing to sit around for the ride and willing to wait for the show to pick up. But I don't want to wait for the show to pick up. I want to sit down, watch a TV show, and be instantly mesmerized by what I see on screen. That's what I want. I want to be interested in the characters. I want to be interested in the locations. I want to be interested. I want to be invested. And I'm not invested in Alma as a main character. And they didn't make the world that their show takes place in interesting either. I mean, San Antonio is a great place, but not the way that they showed it, as in barely showed it at all. But I mean, I guess to be more specific about Alma, because right now I'm just ripping on her without actually talking about what her personality traits are. She complains about the world being the way that it is, and then like her sister's getting married, and Alma makes fun of her for getting married. Like she's making her sister. It says, look at my ring. I'm getting married. I'm excited. And then her Alma immediately just starts ripping on Becca's boyfriend, or I guess fiance now, calling him dumb, saying that Becca only likes him because he's white and rich and like, which I mean, if you're from San Antonio, it's like some of the richest people I know are Hispanic. Like that's just the fact of living here. I mean, that's you can say I'm wrong or say whatever, but I mean, I've been to the fanciest neighborhoods in San Antonio. A lot of the people living there are Hispanic. That's not a logical criticism for Alma to have in San Antonio of all places. But anyways, it doesn't matter. And so like her sister's excited about getting married, and then Alma's just like, you're just gonna be part of the system, blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. As if like this whole Rage Against the Machine thing isn't tired already. Like, yeah, people know that we live on a fucking conveyor belt because it's been conveyor belted out to us in our fucking entertainment for the last 25 or 30 years. I mean, since the 1960s. That's what James Bond was about. It was about escaping the boredom of living a cookie cutter life and watching this badass suave ladies man, you know, James Bond his way through life. Like, that is not a new concept, and you can't, it's not that it's not an interesting one, but it's not presented interestingly here. Like, we don't get we're told that her life is boring rather than that we're shown that her life is boring. She's like, every day I wake up and I do the same things and I eat the same food and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's a voice, or it's not really a voiceover. It's her talking to her sister. We think it's a voiceover, but then it turns out it's an actual conversation with just other visuals overlaid over it. And like, and that's one of the show's biggest shortcomings is its reliance on telling instead of showing. And I know that's like cliche in and of itself, but it's so true. It's so, I'm sorry to keep talking about Breaking Bad, but the movies, as of the time of this recording, the movie's coming out like next week, and I'm super excited. So I just have gone through Breaking Bad again, so it's like on my brain in preparation for the movie. But like, Walter White doesn't look at the camera and say, my life is meaningless. Instead, it shows him working at a high school and teaching dipshits chemistry. And then it shows him working at a car wash, and it shows him and his wife talking about just completely inane, stupid bullshit. At no point does he turn to the screen and say, oh, my life is just so meaningless, and I'm just so sad because I just have so much depth of character, because that would be boring. Nobody wants to watch that. And I don't want to watch it when she does it, because that's exactly what she does. She turns to the camera and says, my life is boring. Okay, how am I supposed to connect to that? Show me that her life is boring, and cutting visuals over a voiceover does not count as showing instead of telling. That's just telling with fucking flashcards attached to it. That does not do anything for me as a viewer. God, I'm heated. And then so later they're going to a dinner, and Alma's like putting on makeup because her mom like got on her for not wearing makeup all the time, and so Alma's like putting on her makeup to get ready for her sister's dinner. And then she puts on all this makeup and dolls herself up, and then she draws a little mustache on herself in, I don't know, one of those, like, I don't know what they're called. They're like makeup pencils or something. I really don't know what they're called. I'm proving the stereotype about guys not knowing shit about makeup right now, but whatever. And then she draws like a little mustache, and then one of the other characters like jokes about how she looks like the Pringles guy. And it's like she does this as like an act of rebellion, but she's 28 years old. It's like, and it just comes across as cringy and childish, and it's just like, I don't want to, this is just making me uncomfortable, and not in a funny way. What are you doing? How can you possibly care this much? You're almost 30. Like, how can you still have such a childish perspective? And maybe, and like, of course there will be people that say, well, that's maybe, like, I was arguing with one of my friends on the way over here. I was like, they was talking about how, like, that's the point of the show. It's to show how entitled she is, and the breakdown of that, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't care about how entitled she is, because I don't care about her as a character. I don't care about her overcoming her flaws, because she's not compelling to watch. I could just as soon never see her on screen again and feel like I was missing out on nothing, you know? Like, I don't feel like this character has any tricks up her sleeve or anything that she really wants to do. She just seems to be sleepwalking her way through life and complaining about it. Like, okay, that's fine, but Don't ask me to be entertained by it. Don't give me this bullshit character study of a character that you've done nothing with to earn my investment as a viewer. Like, I don't care about your character because you haven't made me care about them. That's something that you have to earn. You don't just get to write a story and because you care about your protagonist, expect me to care about your protagonist, because I don't. I need reasons. I need concrete evidence as to why this person is interesting and why they're worthy of my attention span. Because there are about 50 other shows on my watch list that I haven't gotten around to that I could watch instead of this, you know? It's not the 3 channel days of yesteryear. There's a lot of shit that I can watch and a lot of things that are vying for my attention. And if you don't get my attention with an interesting and compelling, not just different, not just unique, but a compelling protagonist, then I'm not watching your show. And that's what Undone has accomplished for me. The only character in the show that I really liked and that I really felt like I could see myself connecting with was Alma's boyfriend, Sam. He was a funny guy. He worked as a waiter on the Riverwalk, which is why they were at the Riverwalk in the show. Because if they'd just been there, like if she, because it was like right after she was complaining about not wanting to be like everyone else, if it had cut from, I don't want to be like everyone else, to them being at the #1 tourist destination in San Antonio right after as locals, I would have just been like, okay, and we're done with this show. But they managed to save it by making him a waiter, which is still just as arbitrary as anything else and was clearly a decision only made so that they could get a shot of the Riverwalk in the show, but whatever. But Sam, I actually found him pretty interesting. I thought that he was kind of cool. I thought that he had an interesting vibe, and it was honestly the thing that I was most interested in is why her? Why do you like her? You seem like a pretty upbeat, easygoing guy. Why are you with the queen of sulking over there? And then in like 8 minutes into the episode, Alma breaks up with him, and then for the rest of the episode, he doesn't appear. And then that's it. That was like the only character. That was like the character that I like sunk my hooks into, and then a third of the way through the episode, he's gone, and I'm just like, okay, and we're back to square one. And like the thing that he really highlighted to me was like he's this easygoing guy. He seems to not really want to upset anyone. He just kind of is a go with the flow guy. And it just highlights how needlessly contentious Alma is the whole episode. Like, that's not drama, you know? Drama is not one character just overreacting to everything that another character says. That's not, well, it's not good drama, at least. I mean, I guess you could call it drama, but that's not what drama's about. That's like some soap opera bullshit. Like, there's a reason I don't watch soap operas, and it's because I don't enjoy them. If I wanted to watch them, I would watch actual soap operas and not this weird rotoscoped experimental show from Amazon that I expected a lot more from. But then he's gone, like I said, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess bye, Sam. That's cool. She just breaks up with him for like basically no reason. Because she's a broken person, you know. Because that's a character trait, being a broken person. Especially if you literally say it outright at the end of the first episode. Oh, that when I watched that, I was just like, oh my god, did they just do that? Not the most subtle way to end your episode. The script was sorely lacking, and I don't think it's because any of the characters or any of the actors were doing a poor job. Like I could actually, even though it's not actually them, it's their rotoscoped avatars or whatever. I really felt like the actors were doing a good job of conveying the emotions that they felt. I just didn't care about any of the characters, which has a lot more to do with the writing than it does with the acting performances. I don't know. I guess let's just wrap this up because this is depressing. Like I said, you've now seen how deep the rabbit hole goes when it comes to me reviewing stuff that I didn't like. This show was a huge letdown for me. Really, really upset with how little this script made me feel, how little this show made me feel. I'm in the minority. Lots of people like this show. You probably have different tastes than me, so you might find something enjoyable about this show. I just know that for me personally, This show hit absolutely no emotional chords with me. It didn't do anything interesting that I felt like I hadn't seen before. And at the end of the day, I don't think sad people sitting around and talking about how sad they are without doing anything is compelling television. Like, because there's negative emotions that you can watch that are fun to watch as a viewer, or at the very least engaging to watch as a viewer. Like watching angry people, that can be fun. Watching like neurotic people be neurotic can be pretty fun. Like Sherlock Holmes or something, like the BBC Sherlock. I really enjoy that show. And Benedict Cumberbatch is like this weird neurotic version of Sherlock. It's fun to watch, but sad is just, it doesn't, the thing about sad is that it's like it deadens you to the rest of the world, and it doesn't make you take action. People don't take action when they're sad. They just sit there feeling sad. When people are like angry or feeling betrayed, then they take action. And that's a negative emotion that has very clear manifestations in the real world. But sad is just, I just don't like watching it. Maybe, I don't know. And I'm not saying that sadness has no place in drama. I'm just saying I don't know that it's like a good gear to start in and then never shift out of, you know? It's especially in your pilot episode when you want to get things moving. Like, the thing is, like, the whole time traveling, or her being able to travel through time with her brain or whatever to solve her father's murder or whatever the fuck it's about, none of that is in the first episode. The only reason I knew about it was because I read it on Google and because I watched one of the trailers. Like, that's not how this works. You don't get to put your inciting incident at minute 22 out of 22. Like, that's wrong. That, if you could have fit the first episode into the first 8 minutes and then had the car crash happen then, and it probably would have been a lot more compelling because they would have been forced to cut all the uninteresting crap and dilute it down to just 8 concentrated minutes. That would have been a much better pilot. And I don't know if the show gets any better than that. My friend claims that it does. I will almost certainly not be watching the rest of it, the other 7 episodes of this show. But yeah, I really hope that streaming services as a whole, like another one that was really, really, really bad about this was season 3 of Stranger Things. I know that's not truly a pilot, but like the first 2 episodes of season 3 of Stranger Things were so mind-numbingly boring. I mean, that whole season as a whole I thought was pretty awful. Whereas like season 1 is like fantastic and totally worth watching, and season 2 was like okay, but season 3, my God. But nothing happens in the first 2 episodes because there's like 28 characters in that show now. Anyways, that's a different discussion for a different time. But season 3 of Stranger Things, the first 2 episodes, nothing happened because they have this massive cast of characters that they're trying to like create all the subplots for, and it's just so bloated and convoluted and ridiculous, and none of it really links up to anything else that's happening in the show. And it's very clear that they're just inventing new things for their characters to do rather than the characters just being like, oh, well, we just did this, now let's go do this because this and this and this, you know? Again, but and therefore, rather than and then, and then, and then, and then, which is what these meandering streaming service shows seem to do because they don't feel like they have to hook your attention immediately anymore. Because there's no commercial break for you to turn away at. It's just this uninterrupted block. And they hope that you'll like the first 22 minutes instead of the first 5 minutes or first 3 minutes or even first 1 minute. I hope they really go back to I'm not saying they need to go back to like a pilot method where it's like, okay, here's the first episode and now it'll be a long wait before the rest of the episodes, especially for something as, I'm sure, time consuming as this, the rotoscoping stuff must have been. That stuff must have taken forever. And again, to reiterate, the rotoscope effect is really cool. I don't think that the first episode really got a chance to do anything cool with the animation. Like, there was nothing about the first episode that worked any better because it was animated, which to me, if you're going to animate something, and from what I saw in the trailers, it looks like later on they do a lot more with the animation, but like, if you're going to animate something, you know, animate it. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. But anyways, if you want to follow me on social media for more I don't know, angry rants or whatever the hell I put on there. It's Fade at Fade In Podcast on Twitter, at Fade In Pod on Instagram, fadeinpodcast.com is the website, and fadeinpodcast@gmail.com is my email address. If you want to send me any suggestions for shows or for anything else, those would be the places to do it. But yeah, as for my final consensus, if you couldn't tell by now, I cannot recommend that anyone watch Undone unless they happen to work for Vox, in which case you'll probably love it because all of the mainstream critics just gobbled it up. So maybe one of these days I'll fix my brain and be able to see what makes this show the compelling classic that everyone else seems to think it is. But as of right now, I don't see it, and I can't recommend that anyone else see it either. Thanks for listening to my weirdo rambling. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next week when I am reviewing something else.